close that and move on here. Okay. All right. Now it talks about some other ones here. We're right here. It says you can also use decimals to find percents mentally. Remember that if we're talking about 10%, it's 0.1, or 1% is 0.01. So for certain things, the percents to decimal way is better than maybe a fraction. So, I mean, we could have said, hey, this is 1/10, and that's true, and you can do the problem that way. It will work, but sometimes it's just easier because tenths are real easy to just move decimal places over. So what they're saying is, if I've got a problem like this that says 10% of 98, well, let's think of this as 0.1 times 98. And if you're taking a tenth times 98, we have to move the decimal. So we're going to get 98 and move the decimal place over one place. So it was right over here. We move it over one, and we get 9.8 for my answer. Or if we have 1%, 1% we know is 0.01, and we know that we're going to move the decimal two places. So here we've got 235, and we need to move it 1, 2. I didn't do that very well. Let's do this bigger. I got 235. Here's my decimal place. We move it 1, 2, and so we get 2.35. So think of, some of the tenths, the ones, those sometimes are just a lot easier to do as decimals. So you guys try these problems right here, and I'll be back in just a second. So hit stop and work through those problems. All right, so hopefully what you figured out was you have 0.1 of 65. Move the decimal one place, gives us 6.5. And ideally, right now, these problems you're doing in your head. Okay, 1%, 0.01. That's a 2 decimal movement. So we got decimal point here. Going to move it 1, 2. Can't see that very well, so let's go back up here. Decimal points here. We move it 1, 2. We get 4.50. And, we probably don't have to worry about that 0 anymore, so we could simply say we get 4.5. Does depend. In science, sometimes those zeros do become important. It's kind of a strange thing. It's called significant digits. Really not a lot of fun for a lot of people, but, in math, not as big a deal. We're not going to worry about it here. All right, so this last one here, we've got 30%, and we could think of that as 0.3. Now, what we might want to think about with this one is, let's just say we had 10%. So let's kind of think of this as two problems. 10% of 22, there's my decimal place. That's a 0.1. I'm going to move the decimal one place, so I'm going to get 2.2. That's 10%, but I got 30. So I'm going to I know that that's got to be 3 times more. So 3 times this. Of course, you would do this in your head. You wouldn't have to write this out. I'm just trying to write it out so that you understand what I'm doing. Is 6.6. So ideally, when you do this problem, what I want you to do is think maybe in 2 steps. Now, you could do it in one. You could go 0.3 times 22, and you could do that and know that, well, it's a tenth, so I'm going to move a decimal, and it's 3. I'm going to take it times 2. Or you could think of it in 2 steps. I think it's probably easier to think in 2 steps as you go through and do that. So that's the way I would do it. I'd do it in 2 steps as I was working through that problem. Okay. All right, what did I do here? All right, so we got another example here. Let's say that we're at Madison Middle School, where 60% of the students voted in an election for student council officers. There are 1,500 students. How many students voted in the election? Now, that's a tougher problem for me to think about. If I said, well, okay, and I can do it as a fraction. It's probably easier as a fraction, 3/5 of 1,500. You can think of it that way. But once again, I'm going to think of it in 2 steps. And so I'm going to think of it as, well, what is a fifth of 1,500? And notice that since I lost my 3, I'm going to add that 3 back in, and I'm going to multiply by that 3. But let's think about this first part right here, 1,500 divided by 5. Now that one I can kind of do. So 5 goes into 15 3 times, and then everything left is 0, so it's 300. But it was 3/5, not 1/5. So I really should have an answer that's 3 times greater than that, or 900. So my answer for this problem should be 900. And this is kind of how they did that over here. They kind of show you this over here as we do the fraction part of it. Now you can also do it in decimal form. You could think of it as 0.6 times 1,500. And if you thought of it as that, you can say, well, it's simpler. Let's break it down into a tenth. A tenth gives me 150 and 6 times those. So 6 times 150. And I could probably do that in my head and get 900. Okay. So lots of good mental math problems for you to do in here. So the idea on this one is how much can you do in your head? And here's how I would really suggest that you do this assignment. Because remember, the object is to teach yourself how to do it. So do it without a calculator. Do it all without a calculator. And then if you want to double check after you're done, then go ahead and do that. Double check it and see how you did. And if you did really, really poorly, you may want to go back and review some of these fractions, because maybe you don't remember these. And there was a reason why we did all this stuff at the beginning of the year, because it is important and you use it all the time. And even if you're not in math, you use that. I mean, you use it when you're going to a store and finding a sale price. You use it when I use it all the time when I'm doing basketball stats. So there's all these different reasons why you would use this, and I really, really encourage you to learn these, because if you learn them now, you'll put in a little bit of time now, but it'll save you so much time later on. It's just unbelievable how many times that you'll run into this stuff in your life. And if you know these numbers, they're so much simpler to do. Okay, so there is section 4. You're now ready to do the assignment for section 4.